Season of Discovery Phase 4 is out. I am inside, logging on, because fuck knows I'm about to spend several days trapped in my house playing a game that came out in 2004. We finally made it, baby. The true classic WoW endgame experience is upon us, where you AFK in Alterac Valley until you hit the max PvP rank and spend hours of your life staring at this iron gate as the finite sands of time which you have left slowly vanish before you into nothingness while you helplessly watch on, all of the while growing no closer to accomplishing any of the things you wish to do with your limited time on this earth. And there, on your deathbed at the ripe old age of 32, you can look into the eyes of your great-grandchildren and say, kids, listen. I got my Fell Striker, it was totally worth it. But I'm getting ahead of myself, because we're not here to talk about the adventures I've had at level 60, we're here to talk about the journey that I went on to get to level 60. Today, we're going to be talking all about the finale of the Leveling Race series between myself and my friend and guildmate John, and if you don't know what the fuck I'm talking about, go watch these videos, I'm not going to catch you up to speed this time. But, spoiler alert, I will remind you that I am currently 0 and 3 in these races, which is maybe not the best. It's not really, listen, things have not been going well for me. But I don't give a fuck, because this is the final leveling race, and the final race is the only one that matters, am I right? I'm coping. I'm coping. Can you tell that I'm coping? Did I make that obvious enough? Anyway, let's move on to... Wait, what the fuck am I doing in the Dancing Troll Village in Darkfall? Get me the fuck out of here. What? What the fuck is... Oh, good. This is where I wanted to be. Thank you so much. However, as always, before I can tell you about the race itself, there are a couple of other things I'm going to go over. First of all, the audio quality in this video may be a bit inconsistent. I'm doing my best to fix it, and if you don't like it, I don't know, man. Go fuck yourself. Secondly, I farmed Bloodsail Buccaneer rep during the tail end of Phase 3, and by doing so, I nearly bricked my odds of winning this final leveling race. Whenever you gain reputation with the pirates, you lose it with the goblins, and I kind of needed access to places like Booty Bay, Gadgetzan, and Everlook, which meant I had to go and undo the damage I had just done to myself. However, small issue, the intended repeatable quest which lets you get reputation back with Booty Bay causes you to lose it with the Buccaneers, which I wasn't willing to do, which meant I had to find a workaround. And not long after this, I did find a solution. All I had to do was kill over 1,000 of these pirates south of Ratchet. You probably think I'm exaggerating, but no, I really did kill about 1,200 of these guys and this dude in order to fix my reputation problem, but I did fix it, and that's what matters here. And the third and final thing I want to tell you about before the race itself is the preparation that went into it. Ever since the first one, myself and John have put a bunch of time into preparing for each of these races in advance, and this one was going to be no exception. I'm not counting my performance in the Phase 2 race. That was a fever dream, it didn't happen. Grow up, go to school, take your medication. And since this was the final leveling race, we were going to be using everything we had left in order to win, which is why I was extremely fucking nervous. You see, there's something which the other 3 leveling races all had in common, and no, I'm not talking about the fact that I fucking lost all of them. For every other leveling race, John managed to win without using everything that he had prepared, so for this final run, he was going to get to pull a whole bunch of bullshit out of his bank while I had to work with comparably very little. There are a whole bunch of items that I could be mentioning here, but really none of them even come close to matching the pure unmitigated value of student fodder. If you don't know, this is a consumable item that was added into Season of Discovery, and when consumed it gives you a heal and, much more importantly, 4 bars of rested experience. Now, I don't need to tell you that that's pretty good for a leveling race, but what I will tell you is that each character can only get a maximum of 11 of these. 8 of these come from the Sleeping Bag quest, which I'm sure all of you remember because I was a fucking idiot when I did it, and the other 3 of them come from the Rainbow Generator quest, which, as you might imagine, I fucked up doing multiple times. On the first attempt, I miscalculated a jump and fell to my death. On the second attempt, both of the NPCs told me to fuck off before walking through a door I couldn't get into, leaving me to wonder how the hell I managed to bug out this event. And on the third attempt, I managed to finally complete one very easy quest in this ancient fucking video game. And yet, despite doing all of this preparation, my nerves were still not settled, because while John still had all 11 of his student fodder, I had to work with just these 3. You might now be asking, hey Mordots, dumbass, what happened to the other 8 of them? And I may or may not have eaten them during the Phase 2 race. Like I said, it was a fever dream, we're not going to talk about it. So I was at a disadvantage, a major disadvantage, but this this wasn't exactly a new concept to me in the leveling races, so I knew that all I had to do was get as much stuff prepared as I possibly could. Now I could spend the next 20 minutes listing off every little thing I did, but that would be fucking boring to watch, so instead, let me tell you about the parts which took the biggest toll on my sanity. First of all, there was my hunt for this bad dragon, black dragon. Terramus the Devourer is notorious for being kited to Stormwind and used to kill low-level players, but for once, I wasn't doing this to fuck with the Alliance. I was doing it to get a flawless Draenifist sphere. Draenifist? Is that how you say it? I don't fucking know. You can immediately hand this thing in to complete a quest for a bunch of experience, but the issue is the drop rate from all of the mobs in the Blasted Lands is really fucking bad. The exception to this rule is Terramus himself, who has a guaranteed chance to drop the orb, and I sure as shit wasn't about to spend hours farming regular mobs, so off I went to find this fucking dragon. It was a pretty boring, tedious process running around for hours looking for this guy, but fortunately a bunch of Alliance players showed up to help keep me company. Shout out to Glado the Gnome Mage, who I killed not once nor twice, but 6 different times. You were very persistent, I will always remember you. And I'm gonna be honest, killing the Alliance is probably the only thing I'm gonna remember from this ordeal, because the rest of the time I was just doing this. Just fucking AFKing at its spawn point. No music, no joy, waiting for a pixelated flying lizard to just turn up. I wouldn't say it was the most boring thing I've ever done, but I also wouldn't not say that, you know what I mean? But don't worry guys, it gets worse, because despite my best efforts of camping out for hours and even logging into the servers right after they came back online after weekly maintenance, I never once, in the entirety of Phase 3, found this goddamn dragon. And I'm sure someone out there is going to ask this question, so let me just preemptively answer it for you. Yes, I did check the auction house every single day, and no, I never saw one of the spheres, so this was one part of my preparation I just had to give up on. And even if I had found him, I would have had to kite him to Stonard, have the guards slowly kill him while I do enough damage at a range to still be able to get kill credit and loot the orb. It was a long shot from the get-go. But hey, it could be worse. At least now I get to look back at this event and say,
well, you didn't fuck up on any other parts of the preparation, so that's good.
And if you're familiar with this channel, then you'll already know that that was obviously a fucking lie. Let me tell you about the biggest mistakes I made during this preparation. I promise we're getting to the leveling race, but I have to talk about this first because it's been eating away at my brain for months, and that is my attempt to get Bram Bronzebeard's Lost Letter. So, let me give you the rundown on what I was doing in this terrible fucking zone. Silithus is a pestilent backwater place to the point where they smited it with a giant sword in retail and nobody gave a fuck. But unfortunately, I had to come here to get the final quest starting item that I needed. At this point, I had picked up pretty much every other quest starting item I wanted, other than a couple of them which I was planning on picking up en route, except for Bram Bronzebeard's Lost Letter, which I'm just going to call the letter going forward because that's a fucking mouthful. And when I first got to Silithus, I thought that this would be a pretty standard affair. Wowhead said that pretty much any of the bugs in this zone could drop the item, so I thought, hey, this will be pretty easy. However, as you might imagine, I ran into an immediate issue, which is that it was phase 3 and I was stuck at level 50. Meanwhile, the bugs decided to do the impossible, see the invisible, and be over 10 levels above me. Oh, and they were also elites, which really didn't help. Fortunately, there were a couple of non-elite variants, which seemed like the only chance I had to get this letter, so I turned my attention to those, and in doing so, found out about an entirely different problem. You see, there's this place in Silithus called Southwind Village, which is home to 2 different types of mobs, Tortured Sentinels and Tortured Druids. These 2 mobs have a rather unique property in the game, which is that when killed, they have a chance to immediately spawn one of the aforementioned non-elite bugs. These Night Elf spirits were at bare minimum 5 levels above me, and the bugs which they spawned would turn up immediately after they died, so even though this was simpler than killing the elite versions, it was still a very slow, very methodical process. On top of that, I couldn't kill the Druids reliably because they would blast me with Moonfire, so I tried to ignore them and focus my attention on the Sentinels, but I couldn't do that either because all of the spawn points in this area were shared by both mobs, so eventually if I killed enough Sentinels, they would all be taken up by Druids. And even when I kill these mobs, they only have a chance to cause one of the bugs to spawn, and when one of the bugs does spawn, it only has a chance to drop their letter. Are you starting to see the predicament I was in? All of that said, when I first started doing this grind, I did some very basic mathematics on how long it should take, and I came to the conclusion that it really shouldn't be that bad. Each kill took me about 4 minutes if I didn't fuck up, so let's go ahead and round that up to 5 minutes, and the drop rate for the letter was supposedly about 2%, which means after about 50 kills I should have the letter. So we take the 5 minutes, multiply that by 50, 250 minutes, just over 4 hours. Really not that big of a deal. What is a big deal, however, is getting to that 50 kill count and then lapping it multiple times over without seeing so much as a scrap of parchment, let alone an entire letter from any of these fucking boots. I spent days of my life here. I would wake up, kite mobs, kill mobs, loot mobs, not get the letter, wonder what the hell I'm doing with my life, and then repeat the entire process without a second thought. This was pretty much the final thing I needed for the final leveling race, which I was more determined to win than ever before, so I couldn't allow myself to give up on it halfway through. But then, suddenly, I had the epiphany to end all epiphanies. My third eye opened on my fucking forehead and I realized the catastrophic mistake I'd made, and immediately gave up trying to get the letter. You see, a while ago in a previous video, I talked about a mob in Ashenvale named Tidorus, who was meant to have a guaranteed chance to drop a quest starting item that I needed. However, after killing the mob multiple times and getting no such item, I realized that I had to have at least started a related quest in the area before the item was eligible to drop. And at the time, I didn't even know that this was a mechanic in the game, so I went and got the quest I needed, went back and killed Tidorus, got the item from him, and learned a valuable lesson. Or so I thought. Later on, during the tail end of phase 2, when I was doing my preparations for the third leveling race, I needed another quest starting item, this time the pristine Yeti hide, which drops off of the Yetis in Northern Feralis. And much like my hunt for the letter in Silithus, at the time of doing it, this one also broke my fucking sanity. Much like the Tidorus incident, these Yetis were also incapable of dropping the item I needed because I hadn't started a necessary quest. Unlike the Tidorus incident, however, this one was much fucking worse because I didn't realize what was going wrong until I had kited hundreds of these things to death. But you guys know how it is. Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. Fool me 3 times with the same mechanic in a 20-year-old video game, I'm gonna give the road outside a taste of my fucking skull. Oh, and to add salt into the wound, I realized that I was too low level to pick up any of the quests at Cenarian Hold, which meant even if I hadn't fucked this up from the get-go, the letter was still impossible to get. Now, I can't technically prove that this was the case for the letter, unlike the other examples I've given here, but with the amount of bugs I slaughtered in order to try and get it, I would put money down on that being the case. Seriously, like a lot of money. Like, so much money. Does anyone want to gamble? I have a crippling addiction. And speaking of gambling, I'm sure that some of you are wondering what the final wager was between Jom and myself. For the first leveling race, we bet a humble 5 gold against each other. For the second leveling race, we bet a slightly not so humble 200 gold against each other. And for the third leveling race, we bet the ability for the winner to take one item off of the loser when they won something in a dungeon or raid that both of us were in. Which, by the way, Jom never used against me during phase 3, which meant it was still looming over my head like a fucking guillotine. But I didn't even care about that at the time, because now we were competing for something greater than the rewards of all of the other races put together, and that was the victory itself. We didn't need the promise of gold or items in order to try our hardest in this final race, we just wanted to do our best in order to win. For Jom, it would mean that he had gone undefeated in every single leveling race we had done, and for me, it would be the comeback of my fucking lifetime. Also, we couldn't think of anything to compete for the final race, so we just didn't bother competing for anything, but that's beside the point, okay? Oh, and I know that somebody is going to ask this, so here are the rules that Jom and myself established ahead of time. You can pause and have a read of them if you like. Moving on. Now, I've got to be honest, going into this final leveling race, I wasn't exactly feeling confident. I just didn't think it was plausible to win with the resources and abilities that I had until I saw that Blizzard had given me a considerable boost right before the race itself began. I'm not going to bore you with the details, but basically, Blizzard changed some runes around and made it so that you can now backstab enemies without having to be behind them, and made the ability itself do considerably more damage. Once I realized just how good this build was going to be for leveling, I began to consider the fact that I might win this thing, and my confidence went back up. And with this newfound tailwind, I headed over to Orgrimmar to make something that I like to call the gotta go fast macro combo. You see, in classic WoW, there are 3 ways to increase your mounted movement speed. The carrot on a stick, which you get from the Gazrilla quest, the mithril spurs, which a blacksmith can put on your boots, and the riding skill enchant, which an enchanter can put put on your gloves. Fun little fact about these items, by the way, they care about your total movement speed, not the movement speed of your mount, which means when you combine all of them on a 60% speed ground mount, you get a movement speed boost of 15%. Definitely not an amount you would want to miss out on, especially if you're, you know, about to be racing against someone. And this brings us to my macro combo, where one of them puts on all of the movement speed stuff I just mentioned, and the other one switches back to my regular gear. And a few eagle-eyed viewers may have already realized what the problem is with one of these macros, because I decided, as a funny practical joke on myself apparently, to get the Mithril Spurs put onto my Goblin Rocket Boots, which have a chance when used to fucking explode. This was a problem because I wrote in the macro to use the boots, and fun fact about the word use, it's not the word equip. What you are now looking at on screen is the moment right after I activated the macro for the first time whilst wearing the boots, staring down the charred remains of my own idiotic decision. But you know me, I always learn from my mistakes, so I went and had another set of Mithril Spurs put onto my gnomish rocket boots. But I will say in my defense, I did correct my wording on the macro, which meant I couldn't accidentally activate these ones, and finally, we were all set and good to go. God damn, dude, it took me like 15 minutes to do the preamble for this video. We haven't even gotten to the fucking main event yet. The viewer retention rate's about to look crazy. And the thing is, even after doing all of this preparation, my confidence for the final race was not exactly the best, but I'd done everything I reasonably could, so all that there was left to do was wait around until 9 PM on the 11th of July, when Phase 4 was set to launch. And what better way to celebrate this event than to log on to my alcoholic bankroll to Moonglower and share out some of the booze which hadn't been available to people since the Lunar Festival.
Phase 4 hype. Phase 4 hype.
I did stockpile arguably an excessive amount of this stuff, but what do you want from me? I have a drinking problem. The problem is I'm not currently drinking. And after those shenanigans had come to a close, I made my way over to Swamp of Sorrows because Job and myself had signed up for a Sunken Temple raid that was firing as soon as Phase 4 launched. And as I sat there contemplating everything which had led me to this point, I thought, you know what, there's probably nothing else I could have prepared. I'm about as ready to go as I could possibly be. And so there I sat, and there I waited until the final leveling race was about to begin. As I made my way over to the temple, I remembered that I was, in fact, playing on a PvP server. Fortunately, I had a Game Shark on me, I mean the ability to stealth, so I managed to make it into the raid without any issues. Now allow me to educate you on the worst part of the Sunken Temple raid, the fucking trash. Before you get to experience the joy of pressing your 2-button rotation against the first boss, you get to experience the misery of having to press your 2-button rotation against a million billion enemies you'll encounter in this snooze fest of a corridor. But don't worry guys, it once again gets worse, because after clearing out all of the necessary mobs, having a group slumber party down by the first boss, and reveling in the fact that the XP bar made itself known to us once again, happy Phase 4 by the way, I recorded this on the 12th of November at 1 in the morning, 4 months after the phase launched. I'm not very good at this whole YouTube uploading thing. We found out that all of the time we had just spent in the raid was fucking wasted. Just like in Phase 3, Blizzard gave everybody a 50% XP buff as soon as Phase 4 dropped, except there was a funny little quirk, a funny little gimmick to this buff, which is that any instance ID that existed prior to the launch of Phase 4 would have anybody inside that instance be unable to get the buff until they left it for some fucking reason. So after the collective brain cells of our group managed to figure this out, we all went outside the instance, left the group, rejoined, got the buff, went back inside the instance, and were finally allowed to play the game. And by play the game, I mean re-clear all of the fucking trash that we already did. However, after this initial hiccup, I really can't complain because the rest of this raid was buttery fucking smooth. From the first boss to the last one, we cleared out this entire goddamn place in only about 40 minutes, making this the fastest I'd ever beaten this raid. And the cherry on top of this whole thing is that after the raid had ended, Phase 4 had been live for nearly an hour, and I had managed to go that entire time without making any mistakes in regards to the leveling race, which is my way of saying mistake number 1. I hadn't completed one of my pre-quests prior to the launch because it required 20 skulls from trolls in and outside of the temple, so I arrogantly thought I could easily get them all in this run, when in reality I ended up only getting 6, meaning I had just effectively bricked one of my starting quests for no good reason. Mistake number 2, I only went into this raid with 19 quests prepared because I was planning on finally handing in the Essence of Aranicus and doing the quests which followed it. However, little did I know, apparently they didn't include the follow-ups in Season of Discovery, so this was yet another brick for the house I was apparently building. And mistake number 3, I realised that I could just walk out of the instance and kill some mobs outside to get those 20 skulls I mentioned, but like an impatient idiot, I had left the raid as soon as it was over, and now I was going to be getting teleported to Reventusk Village in under a minute, so the only option I had to get out of the raid before that happened was to get ripped apart by these mobs. And the best part about this entire ordeal is that I couldn't even do that right. With 617 health remaining, I was banished from the temple in something that I like to refer to as an S-tier Mordot's fuck up. But you know what? I didn't even care because the raid was over and now John and myself could officially start racing against each other. And what better way to kick off the competition than to be cheered on and encouraged by my friends on Discord.
You're still gonna lose.
Eat ass!
Inspiring words as always. Now, let me tell you about what my pre-questing strategy was this time around. During the previous leveling race, I only focused on how much experience each one of my pre-quests was going to get me, which wasn't a terrible strategy, but the issue was I had to fly up and down the goddamn continents over and over again to hand everything in, which meant it didn't end up being that fast or efficient. So this time around, I opted for location instead of experience, which is why I was able to hand in nearly every single one of my pre-quests right here in the hinterlands. And let me tell you, leaving Reventusk Village on the cusp of level 52, still under an hour into phase 4, felt nothing short of euphoric. But for every heads, there's a tails, and as I made my way up to the top of Jinfra Lore to hand in another one of my pre-quests, Blizzard decided that I was maybe having a little bit too much fun. Oh no.
What?
Oh yes!
The world server is down. Fortunately, this funny little bit by Blizzard only lasted a couple of minutes and I was spared of my rapidly growing anxiety. Then, after nearly forgetting that I had the item for it, I went over to do the Robot Chicken Escort quest only for somebody else to have started it up before I got there, meaning that I had to sit around and wait, and I couldn't have possibly known this at the time, but this would go on to become a reoccurring problem. Anyway, the chicken respawned, so I went and completed that quest, handed in a bunch of other stuff I had prepared, and then went down to Stranglethorn Vale for a couple of salty runbacks. In the previous leveling race, I failed to get kill credit on this sea giant, and I didn't even attempt to fight King Muckler, so this time around I pressed backstab against both of them until they were dead. And you know that little reoccurring problem that I just mentioned? It was already coming back for round 2, because as I went to hand in the Muckler quest, I noticed that Princess Pooh Bear was nowhere to be fucking seen. Fortunately, her little disappearing stunt only lasted for about a minute or so, but even still, the fact that I'd already had to wait for 2 different NPCs to respawn this early into the leveling race made me just a little bit nervous, but I'm sure that this is not something that will come up again in this video. Anyway, I returned to Booty Bay, hopped on the boat, resisted the urge to fight all of these guys, flew down to Gadgetzan, bought some essential consumables, and then had a bit of a fucking episode. I went over to the bank to get some quest items out and somehow didn't notice these yellow power crystals which were sitting right here, so I convinced myself that I either hadn't gathered them or that they had disappeared from my bank of their own accord as if they got up and just walked off. Wait, hold on. Something's wrong. I'm not crazy. Something's actually going wrong. I need to relog. One of my quest items just disappeared. And I mean, I literally put it in my bag. I went and handed in a couple quests which didn't involve it, and now it's gone. Editing note, by the way, because now that I've looked at the footage, I actually understand what's happening. I accidentally took the crystals out of the bank when I was taking out other stuff a moment before this, and then put them back into the bank, causing their location to change, and then I just didn't acknowledge the new location, which means I'm not crazy, just really fucking stupid. Anyway, I eventually used the final remnants of my brain power to locate the crystals and then went over to the Shimmering Flats where I handed in this quest which was added into Season of Discovery that lets goblin engineers learn gnomish engineering recipes. If only I had known that this was going to be a thing before I went and got them the old-fashioned way. Isn't Melee Hunter still? Oh, I guess because of the patch, right? Now it's ranged again. That was his logic. Ow, I just fucking slammed my shin. Anyway, after injuring myself by being sat perfectly still somehow, it was time to move on to the next leveling zone.
Welcome to
Ungoro Crater.
I made my way down to Marshall's Refuge, started picking up and handing in quests, and this is a good time to mention just how seriously I was taking this race. Whenever I was entering a cave or building for an extended period of time, I would put on my nifty stopwatch and Skull of Impending Doom so that I could get through those places just a little bit faster. This might seem like overkill, but when your leveling race record is as bad as mine is, I was trying to do everything in my power to not get slowed down. Anyway, I realized that I had immediately slowed myself down because I forgot to get one of my quest starting items out of the bank, so I went back to Gadgetzan to get it, but after that I was really ready to start Un'Goro. My first order of business was killing this plant to hit level 53, you know the deal by now, grats in my comment section immediately, and my second order of business was starting up the Amy 01 escort quest, where I made a classic mistake. Once Amy respawned, I had the opportunity to start up the escort, but I instead decided to ask these guys if they wanted to do the quest together, and in the time that it took me to write that out, they went ahead and started the escort themselves, because they assumed we were just racing to click it first, which makes sense because that's what most people would do, and by trying to be a good person for once, I had just ended up shooting myself in the fucking foot. So your lesson of the day is don't be a good person ever, just be a piece of shit. I didn't want to wait around for Amy to respawn, so instead I decided to go and do something far more productive and took a fucking nap right next to these Alliance players who were doing the same thing. And while we're on that topic, can we just take a moment to give me a round of applause for the sheer self-restraint I had been showing up until this point? I had managed to go 3 entire levels without ganking a single member of the Alliance. Even when I saw people who were lower health or lower level than me, I still resisted the urge because I had to stay on track. Time marched on and I continued questing in the area, headed down to the Slithering Scar, which sounds like the type of place that bigoted transphobe that wrote Harry Potter would come up with, and then got put to death by a bunch of fucking boots. Then, after making the very short, very not irritating run back to my corpse from the only graveyard in the zone, I got to experience the joy of questing for just a few more minutes before I had to do the entire thing again. In Classic, it's like, oh, I gotta go quest. I gotta go, oh no! No! Okay, that's funny. This was technically the end of my pacifism run, but in my defense, this was self-defense, and I really don't think that it should count. For nearly the next hour or so that followed this, all I really did was kill stuff, loot stuff, and have a pretty good time. I was making it through Un'Goro very efficiently, and I wasn't really running into any problems. That is, until I got to Fireplume Ridge, the volcano in the middle of the map for the uninitiated among us. Let me break down this situation for you. I got to this cave where there's a quest to escort a goblin named Ringo back to Marshall's Refuge, and when I got there were 3 other players there who also wanted to do the escort, who invited me into their group. Once I was in the group, I noticed that they had a 5th guy who was offline, which brings us to Galgalon and Vindictor, 2 hunters which showed up a moment later, each hoping to get that 5th spot. The offline guy was then kicked out of the group, Vindictor was invited in, and Galgalon here did not like that very much.
Sorry, we find.
Borrow, why not in me when I was here first and asking?
We find.
Dude, do you really want to upset 5 people for this?
Why not invite me when you were at 4? Was extremely disrespectful.
Galgalon then proceeds to start up the escort before any of us are able to, tells us all to sit, and fucks off out of the cave. Classic WoW really does bring out the best in everybody, doesn't it? Myself and the others were now going to have to wait around for Ringo to respawn, like I said earlier, reoccurring problem. But this time around, I decided I wasn't gonna fucking do it, left the group and moved on with my life. At the end of the day, I was still trying to speedrun, and if I waited around for mobs to respawn, I was definitely gonna end up losing this race. And speaking of respawning mobs, I made a beeline straight back over to Fungal Rock where, amongst other objectives, I got to finally start up the Amy Escort quest. Doing these solo as a rogue is always funny because inevitably there'll be somebody who comes up to the mob in the overworld wondering why it's just walking away on its own. And while we're on the topic, can we just give me another round of applause, because even though this guy was a prime target, I didn't touch a hair on his head. This is something that esteemed scholars of fiction would refer to as character development. And you know what? This is how we know that karma doesn't exist, because only a few minutes later, I got ganked by 3 people and my bloodlust was becoming harder and harder to contain. For the moment though, I managed to keep a lid on it, continued questing, went and did the Ringo escort, handed in a shit ton of quests which got me to level 54 with experience to spare, and not long after this, Drum and myself noticed that the server was gonna go to sleep, so we figured we should probably do the same thing. I finished up my Ungoro business, went and took care of a couple of other quests, and then passed out in the inn in Ratchet. Now, at this point in time, I was nearly halfway through level 54, which meant in terms of level quantity at least, I was nearly halfway done with the race entirely. Obviously, this isn't really true because between Sunken Temple and the pre-quest hand-in, a lot of the experience was just given to us on a silver platter, but even still, a good portion of the leveling was already done and sorted. On top of that, when the server booted us off, John was still level 53, which meant even if he was about to level up and hit 54, I still had half a level's worth of a lead against him. But I had been in this exact same position before, and look at how that turned out. So I wasn't allowing myself to feel any kind of confidence in regards to winning this race until I had already won it. I went to bed feeling incredibly apprehensive because I think both John and myself knew that based on how much of the leveling we managed to already get done, tomorrow could well be the end of the race. After the race resumed, my first order of business was heading over to Orgrimmar, where I handed in a surprising number of quests, netting myself over 30,000 fucking experience. Then I made my way over to the Blasted Lands, where I got to hand in even more quests before forgetting to use my sleeping bag, meaning that I lost out on a bunch of XP and taking another snooze. Then after that, because I never got my perfect sphere, I instead tried to hand in these imperfect Draenophyst, still not sure if I'm saying that right, fragments to this fucking goon, only to learn that this quest doesn't give experience. Wowhead, you lying son of a bitch! But I did find out that Jom also tried to hand in the fragments to no avail, and he'd also not gotten a perfect sphere, so if nothing else, at least we were both equally fucked on this one. I took care of some other business and then picked up the Stones That Bind Us, a quest which I would describe as annoying out of 10 because you have to break these floating shards in order to be able to kill certain mobs in the nearby area, and even though I was strong as fuck and it was Season of Discovery, these guys were still giving me a hard time. But on the plus side, I did hit level 55 during this quest, so it wasn't all bad, just pretty bad. Another reason I'm talking about this quest is that it's the one that caused my bloodlust to finally overwhelm me, because there was a Night Elf priest killing the same limited spawn mobs that I needed for it, and I simply couldn't hold back any longer. But I will say she got the last laugh, because the first thing she did after respawning was come straight up the hill to murder me, so I decided to say fuck it, cut my losses and finish up the quest in a different part of the zone. Then after completing it as well as doing one of its follow-ups, it was time for me to take a little gamble. I briefly showed it off earlier, but I had acquired a new item to SOD named Ariana Grande's Whimsical World Warper, which, as the name implies, teleports you to a random part of the world when used. And having already used this thing a bunch prior to the start of the race, I knew that one of the places it could send me to was right next to Duke Hydraxis in Ajara, which was convenient because I had a quest objective that was right next to him, which meant if I just got the right teleport, this could save me a whole bunch of travel time. I planted my feet on the ground and started charging up the World Warper. For all I knew, this could be it. This could be the make or break of the entire race. Show me Duke Hydraxis! Now, for the sake of comedy, for the sake of content, I would love to tell you that this little mishap caused the entire rest of the leveling race to change, but ultimately I only used the World Warper because my Hearthstone was off cooldown, and therefore it ended up being fairly inconsequential. I mean, sure, taking a flight from Orgrimmar into Ajara in order to get to the quest objective was slower, but I had a quest hand in at the flight point, so it really wasn't that big of a deal to me. I didn't care that the World Warper didn't work out, okay? I didn't give a shit. I didn't give a fuck. I took care of some other quests in the zone and then headed down to the NPC near Hydraxis, who, by the way, was a demon hunter, Legion Remix when Blizzard? Infinite Power 5! This is to go even further beyond! Lorimus then sent me on a series of quests around the entire Bay of Storms, but if you think back to my Phase 1 endgame video, you might remember that I won the swim speed ring in a BFD raid, and I was finally getting to take it out of the bank. This sea giant, who I never knew existed before this, then sent me on a quest to kill this elite Hydra, who I initially struggled to fight against until I remembered that it's Season of Discovery, and I can kite any of these elite quest boss mobs around me like some sort of sadistic puppet master until they end up dead. I even stopped to kill this rare spawn, worth it by the way, and on my way back to Lorimus, I got struck down for my numerous crimes and ended up taking a spirit revive because getting back to him that way would end up being faster. And it should be mentioned that at this point I noticed that John was still at level 54, meanwhile I was 2/3 of the way through level 55, and I know I said I was trying not to get my hopes up, but when I saw this I did feel the slightest bit of confidence. Lorimus then sent me up the cliffs to gather 20 Azurite, the name of which gave me flashbacks to a much worse point in the timeline.
All this stuff.
Such a waste.
No need to panic, though I suppose my entrance was a bit abrupt. The name's Magni Bronzebeard.
And after that was done, I went and paid Duke Hydraxus himself a visit so that I could pick up this quest to do later in Silithus. Spoiler alert, I never ended up doing this quest, and coming over here to get it was just a waste of my fucking time. Then after halving to Orgrimmar, I flew straight back over into Azara because this was the fastest way to get back to the quest givers, and then I took a trip up to this tower to speak with this nerd wizard. Take special notice of the fact that I used my Skull of Impending Doom to get out of this tower at most about half a second faster. I really feel the need to hammer this point in. I wasn't fucking around this time. And evidence of my lack of fuckery could be seen in the race's progress, because now I was about to hit level 56 and John was still at level 54, which meant even in a worst case scenario, I still had 90% of a level in a lead against him. Handed in literally some rune to this goblin who gave me some of the funniest quest text I'd seen in this game, and then got to pull out another piece of my leveling race tech. Because I was a goblin engineer, I got to make the Dimensional Ripper Everlook variant, which dimensionally rips you to Everlook. I took some stuff out of the bank and then travelled across the zone to speak to Denova Snowden, who I had perfectly set up so that as soon as I got to her, I'd be able to hand in 4 different quests. Naturally, I didn't hand any of these in at this point in time because somebody took her away to do some sort of cutscene thing, so instead, I went over to Timbermore Hold and handed in 2 of my quest starting items, the first of which got me to hit level 56. I then returned to Edward Snowden, handed in my 4 quests, and made my way over to Felwood, where I started doing a ton of different shit, most of which was not interesting enough to bother putting in this video. I've already done way too many of those convoluted, unnecessary edits in this thing. It's just, it is what it is, you know, but I have just had this epiphany at 2 in the morning where I'm thinking, I'm the guy making these videos, right? I can do anything I want in them. Like, watch, look, I can do this.
Croqueta de Super Pollo Among Us, la más grande.
I can just do that. That's just a thing I can put in the video. Here, look, I'll do it again. I continued questing in Felwood for a while, but my progress was starting to slow down because I had to do a bunch of running back and forth for single quests, not to mention the fact that I died on multiple occasions, and this graveyard run back is not one that you ever want to have to do. I then had to wait around for an NPC to respawn, reoccurring, so that I could hand in one of my quest starting items to her, so I figured while I was waiting, I might as well get some B-roll footage. Not gonna bother using any of it though, because the Night Elf respawned and I reluctantly agreed to help her, which I shouldn't have done because the experience you get from this quest is really not worth the fucking time that it takes. But despite the fact that it took me half my remaining lifetime to do this one, I still bothered to finish it, killed this guy for the fun of it, and then went down to Ashenvale to grab a flight into Orgrimmar. Looking at this footage, I can't figure out why I would choose to do this instead of using my Hearthstone, which also sends me to Orgrimmar, but I suppose the me of the past must have had some 5D chess giga strategy in mind that the current me looking back at these events can't possibly decipher or remember. Either that, or, much more likely, I had taken an iron to my brain to really get out all of those pesky wrinkles and was just being a fucking idiot. I took care of a bunch of stuff in the city before buying a flight down to Ratchet, where I spoke to Islam Waterseer, who proceeded to summon this fat-ass water elemental right before my eyes. This is something that I love about Classic. Even if you were done with a zone ages ago, the game will still occasionally send you back there for some quest or other objective, making the entire world feel much more alive and immersive. I sure wish every version of the game worked like this. I went over to Thunderbluff to pick up and hand some stuff in, and then went down to Tanaris to hand in this quest, which nearly got me to hit level 57, so I figured while I'm here, I'll just kill a few giants and get that out of the way. And I just want to say, in this moment, for the first time in any of the leveling races, I was 2 levels above Jom. And due to some boring ass nerd math I did, which I'm not going to bother explaining to you, here it is on screen if you care, go pause the video, I felt an intense fire start burning within me, and I began to think maybe, just maybe, this was the one that I could fucking win. in. After landing in Thunderbluff, I handed some stuff in and then took a flight all of the way up to Winterspring. Definitely should have used my World Warper here. There's no way in hell that could have gone badly right. I then went over to Frost Whisper Gorge where I hit the jackpot on arcane crystals. We are so fucking back. The quest down here in this gorge only has you collect 10 Frost Maul shards. You don't have to kill anything or do anything dangerous, especially if you're playing a rogue like I was. So naturally, I tried 1v1 in one of these giants, paid the price for it, and had to make another excruciating graveyard run. Then as I was climbing out of the gorge in shame, I noticed that John had hit level 56 while I was busy fucking around gaining no experience, so I reminded myself to lock in until the race was over. For the following 30 minutes, everything on my screen was kill on sight, including myself. I handed in some quests at Everlook and then found out that John was getting really badly corpse camped in Ungoro Crater. Under normal circumstances, I would immediately drop everything I was doing to go to his side and help him, but since we were racing and since he was in a different fucking hemisphere, the best I could offer him was some lip service and to continue on with my questing. I finished up my business in Winterspring for the moment, Hearthstone to Orgrimmar, took a blimp over to Undercity, handed some stuff in, took another blimp over to Gromgol, and then made my way over to the Searing Gorge because John and myself decided we were going to check out Blackrock Eruption, the new event that was added into Phase 4. What the fuck? I don't really have a lot to say about this event. I mean, it was alright. It was fucking fine, I guess. John and myself spent a bunch of time trying to figure out what the hell we were meant to be doing, but once we got into the swing of things, we got quite a lot of stuff done in the 45 minutes we were there. Except for the fact that I died on this final quest mob, meaning that I didn't get kill credit and John did, so he got to hand in one extra quest, which I didn't, but that was okay because I was now nearly level 58 and John was still 56, which meant I'd been maintaining my lead just fine. And if you thought we were done with this high octane action, you'd be dead wrong because John and myself were about to delve into the greatest dungeon that Blizzard Entertainment have ever fucking made. After picking up the dungeon quests and forming the group, I reluctantly decided to tank this one because we couldn't find a pug who was willing to do it. Now personally, I think that rogue tanks struggle to keep aggro on multiple targets in Season of Discovery, but because I'm built different, you know that I had my own make-do solution. Just pop a sapper charge, blow yourself up, watch on as a gold's worth of materials vanish into the void forever. Your healer's gonna hate you for chunking your own health bar. I wish I bothered to go and get fan of knives before this. It doesn't fucking help you keep aggro anyway. However, despite all of the build-up that I've given this dungeon run, there really wasn't that much worth talking about. 5-man dungeons in SOD are typically safe, trivial things with stuff going wrong on very rare occasions. With that said, I will be skipping over all of my deaths in this run because that's a skill issue and I refuse to acknowledge it. Early on into BRD, I hit level 58 and at that point my confidence had never been higher and I truly believed that so long as I didn't eat shit, I would be able to win this race without issue. But then, suddenly, every neuron in my brain activated out of pure fear at the same time because I saw that John hit level 58 when I was only 5 bars into it. I genuinely have no idea how he caught up as fast as he did, even with student fodder in mind, but either way, I went from being reasonably calm to unreasonably panicked. What I needed now was for something to give me a confidence boost, get rid of all of my anxiety, and make me believe that I still had a great chance of winning this thing. Then at the end of the dungeon, Hand of Justice dropped and I won it. Let's fucking go! This was the exact type of pick-me-up that I needed, but I'd be lying if I said that John catching up to my level during this run didn't scare the absolute fucking shit out of me. This anxiety I was feeling was then reinforced because we went to do the core attunement quest, and by we, I mean John, because it's not shareable, I forgot to pick it up, and now he was gonna get another source of experience, which I wasn't. After that, it was time for us to make our leave from BRD, and so I decided to encourage everyone to do so in a burning body bag. This is when I found out that they also put a spirit healer inside the mountain for SOD. I thought I was going to arrive at Thorium Point, so this skip wasn't quite as good as I was hoping for. Once I got back to Thorium Point, I dropped a sleeping bag for both John and myself, and then we decided to take a 45-minute break because we'd been gunning this shit non-stop for the last 10 fucking hours. And I'm gonna take this opportunity to stop time for a second and tell you to keep this moment in mind because I'm gonna be coming back to it a little bit later. For now though, I think it's about about time to finish this fucking race. After getting back from our break, the first thing I did was hand in some, but not all of my BRD quests because I forgot to stop by Burning Steps and instead took a flight straight down into Stranglethorn Vale. I also had to deal with the fucking Blood Moon, so when I landed down in Gromgol, I got an intense case of deja vu because this exact scene played out more times over the course of these leveling races than I would like to admit. Went and handed in a quest, got back to Gromgol, remembered that I can't just run past the guards because the Flight Master is also aggressive, went out, respect, stealthed back in, turned off the moon because I have that power, and then took a flight over to Stonard. Once I got there, I picked up this quest, Uniting the Shattered Amulet, which very explicitly tells you to use the enchanted weapon that you just got in Stranglethorn on the quest boss mobs that you're about to be trying to kill. They even bother to highlight it in big capital letters so that even the dumbest sacks of shit on this burning space rock would be able to figure out what you have to do. However, as many of you are already aware, I can't fucking read, so I tried fighting not one, but two of these mobs before wondering, that's weird. I wonder why this isn't working. Did I use this opportunity to learn and grow as a person and become better at the game? No, I immediately abandoned the quest and wrote it off as impossible rocket science that somebody of my caliber couldn't possibly complete, and in some senses of that logic, I was correct. And it was at this moment, when my nerves already felt like they were reaching their peak in regard to the leveling race, that they got hit with the equivalent of a Bosnian missile strike, because just over halfway into level 58, I opened up the guild tab and there I saw that John had hit level 59. Well, that's not fucking good. Listen, I would love to feign ignorance right here and tell you
I have no idea how John managed to catch up and overtake me.
but truth be told, I knew exactly why this had happened, and it was because John was pulling out all of the stops at the end of the race, and I had just made a bunch of fuck-ups back to back, and I'd be lying if I said that in this moment I wasn't having some intense flashbacks to every other time that I fucking lost. But I decided, you know what? No, I'm not gonna let it overwhelm me, because I can still fucking win. I flew back to Burning Steps to hand in my other BRD quests, and then Hearthstone to Orgrimmar, where I flew down to Tanaris and Ungoro Crater to scare the shit out of two goblins with a Yeti. What a fucking sentence, by the way. After that, I popped to my Dimensional Ripper Everlook to get back to Winterspring and do any quests which I had left unfinished. We were then back to anything and everything being kill on site, including myself. I'm starting to notice a pattern in Winterspring, and then I went up to deal with Shira Tam. I have no idea if I'm saying that right. I assume it's phonetical, but who knows. This then became one of my most hilarious fuck-ups because I tried fighting this thing head-on and that didn't work, so I vanished and then swapped to my kiting build, ran this thing around in circles for 2 minutes before its mate decided to jump me, turning this into a 2v1. In this moment, I feel like I ascended and saw the very code behind the game I was playing because I realized, wait a minute, I can just kite both of them to death. The only downside is it's going to be agonizingly slow. I then spent the next 5 minutes kiting these guys up and down before fucking up the routine right at the end of the fight and causing it to reset anyway. At this point, I had two options available to me. I could either try again or I could fuck off, and I chose the latter because I just spent the last 7 minutes filling 2 cats with poisoned knives and had nothing else to show for it. I then immediately got myself killed because I was fucking panicking, handed in some quests, went back to killing everything, got all of my goddamn tags stolen, and then, after far too many delays, finally hit level 59. This was it. Both John and myself one level away from finishing the final leveling race between us. Everything was still to play for, and so now more than ever it was time to focus up and finish this thing. I killed the last of the mobs that I needed, handed the quest in at Denova Snowden, and then it was time to go back through Timbermore Hold because I had another quest lined up in Felwood that I could complete very fast and efficiently, and I knew that as soon as... Hey you, you're finally awake. I thought I would take you guys out into the woods. A little bit of quality time just between you and I. After all, this series started with me touching grass, so it's only fitting that it ends in the same way. If you guys aren't going to do it, then I'll just have to do it for you. You can touch grass vicariously. Now, you might be wondering why I've brought you out here into the middle of relative nowhere. And that's because I'm going to kill you and wear your skin. That was obviously a joke. I'm not going to do that. I wanted to take the opportunity to bring you out here because this is the nicest weather that the UK's had in several years. So I figured, hey, why not make the most of it and let my viewers experience it as well. You might be wondering, but Mordots, who won the final race? What was the great conclusion? Don't worry about it. Let's just have a nice walk in the wilderness together before I get specced out by some ganking PKer, before a roadman jumps out of the bushes and stabs me, turning me into another statistic. Also, if the audio quality in this part of the video sucks, you can blame Mother Nature, as I do for everything that goes wrong in my life. What the fuck is this? What is that? I'm not even gonna fucking ask. Dude, imagine if someone comes by and they're like, what are you doing? And I say that I'm filming footage for a World of Warcraft YouTube video. Given the context of where we are, I feel like there's not a lie that's like less believable than that. Ah, yes, wonderful, just what I wanted. A place where I can soak my ass in rainwater. Perfect, ideal. Just gonna go ahead and, you know, get rid of some of that. Yeah, it's looking dry. That's looking real fucking dry. I lost that final leveling race, you guys. I lost it really, really fucking badly. It didn't even end up being close, to be honest. I got like halfway into Timbermore Hold, opened up the guild tab, and there he was, John, at level 60. Just like that, the race was over. And honestly, I didn't even feel bad. I wasn't sad, I wasn't angry. I was just relieved that it was over, and honestly, very impressed by John, because he got those last 2 levels really goddamn quickly, and I completely fucked it. I'm sure that many of you will think that this is a rather sudden and anticlimactic ending to the race, but something you've got to keep in mind is that the race itself ended very suddenly and anticlimactically. And also, pretty much every day since that race ended, I've been brainstorming how I could convey the ending to you, the audience, given the fact that it didn't end in the most flashy or crazy of ways. And we're a few days away from me releasing it. And here in the pivotal moment, the best I could come up with was rambling to you about it while walking around in the middle of nowhere. Don't worry, everybody. Dinner is sorted. Sometimes in life, you're going to be winning in every sense of the word, and then somehow the win is going to get swept out from under you. Other times, you're going to be on the back foot, and in the most pivotal of moments, you'll find a way to push through and get that dub. But the most important thing is that you always stay focused, you always stay humble. And really, above anything else, the most important thing you have to keep in mind in life is to say thank you to this video's sponsor, NordVPN. Go to nordvpn. Anyway, I think I've yapped to you for far too long. I have a video to get back home and finish making, and the me of the past has one final level cap to hit. And now I'm going to do some cringe like, oh, we're going back to the game footage, ooh. I couldn't be bothered to do the edit. What are you gonna fucking do? GG, well played, the better man won. Like I said before, I'm sure that many of you were not expecting this type of ending. I wasn't expecting this type of ending, but what can I say? Life will come at you with many surprises. Take me, for instance. I've spent most of my life playing this video game that only has 2 buttons, and I've still yet to figure out what either of them do. As is usually the case with these videos, now that the race is over, I'm not gonna go into much detail about the rest of my leveling process because it wasn't very interesting. I met up with John and we shared a moon glow together to commemorate the ending of the final race. Happy phase 4. Then he decided to stick around and give me a hand with some of my questing while we spoke about the leveling race and how it went from each of our perspectives. It was a good time. Then once we got to Orgrimmar, somebody was asking for help opening a lockbox and I stepped up to the plate to do it, only to find out that he knew who I was because of my YouTube channel, so big shout outs to Player from the guild Okie Dokie Lit Club. After that, we both decided to take a nap in-game and in the real world, came back the next day to massacre literally anything and everything in the Eastern Plaguelands, went and killed some lower level mobs to top up my experience, and then, once I was right on the cusp of hitting level 60, it was time to go and put an end to this 1,000-hour long journey. Over a year ago, when Season of Discovery launched, I leveled up for the first time in a rather unconventional way, so I thought it was only appropriate to get my final level up in the same location that I got my first one, and that was a place near and dear to my heart, Gurubashi Arena. Once I got there, I thought about everything that had come before this. The phased leveling, the new runes and raids, the chaos and camaraderie, Jom and friends, and of course, the leveling races themselves. It had been a long journey with many discoveries made along the way, but now it was time for all of it to come to an end. What you are witnessing here is a level 59 Troll Rogue, 92 experience points away from level 60, about to hand in the Arena Master trinket for the first time. I'm not beating the allegations, I'm embracing them. You know, that was a memorable experience, and I think if given the chance, I would do all of it again. Other than the races, because as much as I enjoyed doing them, I am permanently retiring from that shit. Oh, and that little time stop bit I did earlier, I was meant to already cut back to and reference that, but I forgot to because I'm bad at what I do. So instead, you get it here like a round peg in a square hole. I'm gonna give you the quick abridged version. All I was gonna say is that when that BRD run finished, if I had instead fucked off the Strathholm, Scholomance, or Lower Blackrock Spire, I really think I had the potential to win this race, but instead I decided to go and do weird quests no one's ever heard of, and then I didn't even end up fucking completing them. Anyway, that's all I had to say about that. Now, where were we? Oh right, the end of the journey. And I've got to say, once everything was said and done, I truly don't think that I could have wished for a better leveling race opponent. Even though John won every single time, I never felt any kind of salt or bitterness towards him, and I really believe that that's because there's nothing in this world which could ever make me hate this guy. Just kidding, I took that cow down into the arena and butchered him for meat, turned him into a fucking sirloin. Nobody goes 4-0 against me. Actually, I do have an epilogue I want to quickly do, so the video's not quite over yet. Sorry to disappoint you. I'm gonna ring you out for every second of your time that I can get. I'm sure some people are wondering why this video took so long. That's my bad. I took 3 months off to get drunk and make Sanrio Core pick mixes, and when I finally got to working on the video, I did so very, very slowly. But at least it's out now, and I really hope that you guys enjoy it. Because I'm never making another one. Ever. I'm done with World of Warcraft videos. Permanently. Okay, maybe not permanently. Truth be told, I quit playing SOD about halfway into Phase 4, and I never really picked it back up again, so for the moment, I'm fresh out of stories to tell. On that note, I want to give a big thank you to everybody who stuck with these videos, and if this is where we part ways, then that's fair enough, because, I mean, well, it's only going to get worse from here. Shout out to Crusader Strike EU, shout out to Jom and friends, hell, shout out to the Season of Discovery development team. On the whole, I really liked everything you guys did, and I'm hoping that we see more stuff like it going forward. But of course, the biggest shout out has to go to all of my 6'5" commenters. Without you guys around, I would not have put in nearly this much effort. Anyway, I think I'm finally done yapping. Happy holidays to everybody who celebrates them. Thanks for watching the fucking video, and I'll see some of you in, well, whatever the hell I decide to make next. Why are we all just chilling? Let's go.
No, everyone's gone. Joe's AFK and everyone left me and I got scared, but I thought you're the cameraman, so I'll come back to get more screen time, obviously. Right, onwards. Is it this way?